What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA Show, powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/All-NBA. I'm your host, Adam Mares. My esteemed colleague, Tim Legler, was on Van Pelt's show last night. He's traveling back home today, so he is off the show today. But I brought in a slew of guests to help me do a deep dive on a couple different teams, the first of which is going to be Dane Moore. Let's welcome in Dane Moore to the show of the aptly titled Dane Moore podcast. I always love that one. Covering the Wolves, and he had a good one last night. Dane, how you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. I feel like you and I talked more last season when the Wolves were better. You would be like weekly giving me Nickeil Alexander-Walker texts, and now I don't know. I don't hear from you.
Yeah, they're kind of boring, man, to be honest with you. They're last year's news. No, I'm kidding. They actually are very interesting because they're, in my opinion, a little bit discouraging. We're going to get into that, but we start the show, as always, with layup lines. Let's get into some layup lines here. Layup lines are, of course, our quick hitters on things that are going around the NBA. And I'm going to start with one that you got to see up close last night, which is Dereck Lively, broken foot, not available for the Dallas Mavericks. I don't know how you feel, Dane, but I think the Mavs are a top 3 team in the Western Conference. You wouldn't know it because they are the most unlucky team of the Western Conference this year. And this one's a big deal. Gafford's a good player. They need Lively. And so if Lively has a broken foot, first of all, he's a 7-footer. There's a time frame on it, be back by the playoffs, this or that. But young 7-footer with broken foot, I hear that and I think it's season altering. Do you feel as strongly as I do that this is a thing that changes the way you look at the Mavs?
It's interesting going into the game last night. I'd watched Dallas's previous game, and Gafford was awesome. He had 31, 15, and 7 blocks. It was against the Hornets on Martin Luther King Day. But still, I was like, okay, like I have always kind of thought that Daniel Gafford could be a real 30-plus minute a night center. And then I'm watching last night, and he's playing a better team, and he's playing against Rudy Gobert, and he's playing against Naz Reid, and he's playing against Julius Randle, and they often went away from him to play like Kleba and go to just go to other options and not really just give him that like 30-minute a night sort of thing. So I think to your point, and I agree that I see Dallas to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference, but they need to like stay in relevance until Luka comes back after All-Star and can kind of be set to go whenever it is that Lively returns. And I think Gafford's a really big part of that, but I wonder, can he only be really effective against lesser teams? What's it going to be against, the other teams that he's competing against in the Western Conference, like the Wolves? Like he didn't look to be a clear cut filling up that space for Dereck Lively. Yeah. And I look at Gafford most here of like, can you be the guy at the 5 without them? And sometimes it seems like yes. And I think times like last night, you're not as sure.
I just think it's the depth piece. I mean, and then you said something there, which is, they can stay afloat without him. I think I'm not worried about the regular season. I don't know that they're going to be a top 4 seed again, just because of the injuries. They have the talent to, if they're all healthy, but now you're talking about one turned ankle. Are they going to be able to do it? But for me, it's more the playoffs, because you're going to say that he's a young player and he's a big part of the identity, and he comes back right before that. And now you have to go on the road in the playoffs and get a win. That's what I'm more concerned about. Is I saw this last year with Denver. They got healthy right before the playoffs, but it wasn't enough for them to be at their best. And when those things happen, man, it's just so hard to make a deep playoff run. They're talented enough to do it. I just think this one takes a huge, huge bite out of those chances. And that's why, that's why I'm concerned for them. Another story.
How do you think about, sorry, just quickly, what do you think about them at the deadline? Like, how would you pursue that as Dallas?
To be honest with you, I don't know, because remember they were, the word dangling Gafford was out there. I don't know, whatever it was, that they were open to moving him. Now I don't think you can do that. Quentin Grimes is another guy who has been great for them, but I think they viewed it as, but we could maybe use that resource. He's having a great year. We could use that to upgrade another spot. But with all the injuries and stuff, you look at it and go, I just don't know if that's as viable as it was before. So that's how I look at it. They obviously made great moves last year. I think they have a good front office for making moves. So maybe they get something done, but I don't know. What is your thought?
Yeah, it's probably just health for them is their trade deadline acquisition, right? If you can have more of these guys more healthy in the final 25 games of the season than you did. The limited assets that they have, given that they went for Washington and Gafford last season. I'm just curious. I think it's been so interesting how they've gone with like the 48 minutes of that type of five next to Luka, and you can't really do that anymore. And I do think about the regular season with them, because I do think kind of seating position is important in this Western Conference too. So I don't know. It's not like a clear cut. I'm not like, oh, they have to do this, but I think they should be conscientious about, to your point with Denver, and kind of ascending as they get in there, and at least giving themselves an opportunity to maybe grab that 3 seed come, the end of the season.
I think that's out of the question, though. They're at 21 losses right now. The 3-seeded Memphis Grizzlies are at 15. Denver right behind them with 16. I think Denver's on a roll. That's 5 games in half a season. It's tough to do unless those teams trip up. And now you're not counting on one, you're talking on multiple ones. And that's why I don't even know if seeding at this point, where they're at, doesn't matter. You might get a Houston, you might get a Memphis, you might get a Denver in the first round. And then after that, no matter what happens, I think you're almost certainly going to be on the road, because even if you're the 3 seed, now you have to go on the road. So to me, I look at it and I go, I think that ship has sailed with them. So, sure. So I don't know if it's going to happen for him this year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander went for 54 points last night. It was a career high for him. He's been approaching career highs, right, all season long, pushing the bar up. And now he gets his first 50 piece. It was 54, the most ever by a Canadian. The MVP conversation's for another day. But the thing about Shai is he really is scoring like one of the great scorers in the NBA right now, but he never got the volume. And I feel like this last month, he's starting to get the volume game. He's been a consistent 33 a game, 33, another 33 piece. But now he's starting to mix in these 45s, 50, 54. And to me, it actually is a meaningful thing, because we knew he was good, but these huge performances now are starting to stack up more consistently.
Why do you think that's happening? Because it's not, I mean, they've been missing guys. Like, is this just his ascension? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what makes him switch that gear into being like, all right, I'm not a guy that's going to be 33 a night, versus I am really going to boost that usage into being a player who on a hot night can have 45, 50 plus. Like, where are you seeing them shift, or him shift within the context of that team to let him be more of that hard, like the can put up that crazy individual scoring performance? What's the difference, do you think?
Well, I think what's funny is they have the fewest clutch minutes, or second fewest. I think Washington actually has the fewest, because they're never in any games. But Oklahoma City blows teams out, and that really is how you get. You need a close game. But I think there's also a piece of this of, when you're a great scorer, there's such a team system. Jokic had to go through this, where it was like, we're a team. Yes, I'm the best guy, but I'm not going to shoot too much. And there's a light bulb that goes like, no, sometimes what you need is actually just to press the advantage until they can stop it. And if they never stop it, then you go for 50. And I think Shai is, he's almost like playing the best, scoring the easiest of his career. And so there's almost this level of, why stop? Why, like, if that's the thing that's working, just do it every single time. And he's doing it right now against everybody. And I love the comparison to Kobe, because I think he looks like Kobe, like in a lot of ways, his footwork. He's just a herky jerky version, where Kobe was a smooth version, but the moves are all the same. And I think you're starting to see the, like, okay, well, if they can't guard it, man, I'm just going off and I'm punishing guys over and over. And, it's interesting. I think he's going to keep it up personally.
I always thought of their advantage, obviously Shai being the best player, but the advantage was the collectiveness of the group, right? And that seemed to be what, like, Dagnall wanted to hit to be the advantage, and the group collectively played that way, right? That is kind of the brilliance of the Thunder, is just kind of growing and growing and growing in that. And I wonder if, as you've like leveled up and leveled up and leveled up within this style, if you can then have so much buy-in that you can start to really pick advantages within an advantage. And Shai is obviously the number one advantage within the context of the team. I mean, it's no shortage of Oklahoma City praise to go about, everywhere right now, but I think it's a signal of them finding ways to get that 1% better, consistently and kind of, and stack and grow on that. And that's why I think this team should be scary to anyone, and probably should be the favorite in the West, that they certainly should be the favorite in the West that they are.
I mean, 36-7. I mean, they're probably a month and a half away from being able to enter coast mode. A month and a half away from getting Chet back, maybe a little bit less than that. And I think they'll be up by so much they can figure out what they want to do going into the playoffs, which is a huge advantage in today's NBA, being able to coast or ease into the playoffs. The last one I got for you in layup lines. The Detroit Pistons beat the Atlanta Hawks last night. Actually beat them down. They were up 20 at the half. The game only finished 10, but it really wasn't that close. The Pistons now are 23-21 and in the 6th seed. They pass the Atlanta Hawks with that win. Last year it was the Pacers. You could even say a little bit it was your Timberwolves. Every year there's a team that has the magic to them. This like feeling of, hey, this is our year. We're over a hump. Detroit is on a run right now. They've won 7 of their last 10, but they've really won that for several 10-game stretches now. I think they are the team this year with a little bit of the magic, and I wouldn't be surprised. They have the Hawks, the actual magic, the Heat behind them. I think they have an actual chance of beating those teams and avoiding the play-in. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the magic of them reminds me of the Magic last season.
Okay.
Where it is like a team that I'm impressed by and is significantly better than I anticipated them to be. I still just see some overall like roster construction fits or a lack of surrounding talent around Cade, like maybe Orlando did with Paolo last season. I think they are certainly on an upward trajectory. I don't know how much I'm into the idea of them being a team that could really contend to win a first round playoff series, but it's a huge accomplishment for them. I mean, it's funny. I've been watching a lot of Detroit this year because the Wolves have their first round pick lottery protected, and it's kind of like this swing asset for them that they can they could potentially use in the deadline. Right now it's their only first that they have access to. I think that pick's going to cash from a Wolves perspective, and it's because of what Biggerstaff has done, and I don't mean to take away from the style that they're playing. They've added a Malik Beasley, a Tim Hardaway Jr., and they've addressed some of the like pretty obvious flaws or areas that they were coming up short a season ago. And then Cade's the number one story there of him making his, that superstar leap that you can believe in. It's like, all right, yeah, you actually put some shooting around him. You actually put giving him an opportunity to have like a fair chance against the other team's number one guy. And he's winning that, all the time. I'm super impressed with Cade and just how quickly like teams can change from being one of the worst teams in the league to a legitimate playoff team is, I don't know. In many ways, I think it's one of the cool things about the NBA today.
It is cool. I mean, that's certainly, we're seeing more of it than we used to, where it almost was like no team snuck up on you. Now every year there's a handful of teams now that sneak up on you, so to speak, and they're them this year. The thing about them, coming into the year, everybody said, look at the Pistons at the trade deadline because they're the team that can absorb. Everything is going to flow through Detroit. If they win for the next 2 weeks, if they just go on a run here, and all of a sudden you're like, no, they're firmly in the 5-6 area. They firmly have a chance to avoid the play-in. I just wonder if it changes how they approach the deadline of why are we taking on other team salaries? We're right there to make a move to be in there.
But you could do both, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, you can't accomplish both.
Can't you take on like the type of cash now that is actually a player that helps you, that helps you win? I think there's a lot of guys like that floating around as potential.
Is this your pitch for Julius Randle? Is this what you're trying to do?
A little bit,
I knew right where you were going with it, man. Come on.
You know what I'm saying? In all seriousness, there's a lot of like Julius Randle, like Zach LaVine. There's like a lot of these type of guys where you need to consider bringing them in differently based on what their salary structure is. And that contract of Julius Randle, of Zach LaVine, of choose your type of $30-40 million player. Like that has a different value to everything. And to Detroit, this is what I think makes moves in the league now is like, which player to us is most valuable, to us. And there's a real delta between what that player is functionally to you versus other teams. And that's what I think forces actions in the trade deadline. So point being, like they can go choose their type of like archetype, right? Of guy that they want to add. Plus they have the financial flexibility to maybe even be doing that while coming up like asset positive. Can you buy and also bring back, picks or a young player in that too? I think Detroit is positioned in a really unique way at this deadline right now where how many other teams could even be that, the trade deadline runs through this team. They're in a really nice spot to be the team that the trade deadline runs through, but also have a case of being a buyer. That's just ideal.
Well, another team that's interesting at the deadline is your Minnesota Timberwolves, who got a win last night against the shorthanded Mavs, 115-114, and it was a much-needed win in the clutch. But it didn't feel to me, because the thing I want to ask you is about the Wolves in the clutch. Their offense is they're still figuring out who they are, what their closing lineups are, and watching them. And I've seen a lot of their clutch games this year. It's a pain. I can't imagine for Wolves fans what it's like, but I have no confidence in that group scoring in the clutch. And last night, to say they got the win in the clutch, they blew a lead and then held on, is how I would put it a little bit, against a shorthanded team. So that's where, I mean, you could mention with last night's game if you want, but it really is more of a question about, I think clutch time performance is a great indicator for playoffs, because the playoffs feel all like clutch time. And the Wolves are in a lot of close games because they don't separate. In my opinion, they can play good defense at times, but they don't separate. So you're going to be in a lot of close games. And then in those last 3 minutes, it's really hard to space the court properly, in my opinion. So that's my concern for the Timberwolves. Do you feel like that's the big story with them right now?
I think it's the big story as it connects to Ant, and kind of a confounding one in that, what do we know about Ant from a playoff standpoint? To your point, is he's been excellent. Even 20 when he was 21 years old, and he did that against Memphis. Like, Ant was a very good playoff player. The rub, though, is he has not been a good clutch time player in the regular season in the NBA, and the why behind that is interesting to me. And I think he holds some blame there in seeing like a team throwing a different coverage in just those moments. It often still takes Ant a little bit of time to compute what it is that we need to be doing against this action. And if you go through a lot of the clutch time stuff, he's kind of ran into where the defense wanted him to go, or altogether like blown up the action that Finch drew up and just kind of went and got the ball and took a shot. There's a lack of execution to Ant's game in these clutch time situations. I think what the confounding part of the question is like, how much of that is on Finch, and how much of that can Finch even be controlling by doing X, Y, and Z coaching in the clutch, and how much of it, to your point, is just broken because there's going to be spacing issues out on the floor when they play their starting five to close games. I will say Finch has made adjustments, though, to not be playing Rudy in those spots as often. Jaden McDaniels is oftentimes a shooting liability when he's just kind of sitting in the corner. But they've kind of pivoted to going small. Last night they closed with Randle at the 5, McDaniels at the 4. Like then you don't really have that like Rudy in the way in the dunker spot, or Jaden's more functioning as a big, so he's not like the swing winds up in Jaden's hand. Now, when he's at the 4, he can be used as a screener. He can cut. He can slip. Like, he can play more like a big. So I think they have roster combinations, lineup combinations to be able to play the right way in the clutch. The issue is there's like some politics to that. It's like, you're going to really not close with Rudy every single time. Like, Julius has been pissed when he hasn't closed at games, and I get this from
he's been pissed sometimes when he has closed.
That's
also ball appropriately.
But he was great last night in how they closed the game there. I mean, the Julius Randle, everybody hates him here, but like the arrow of his production is definitely like going up, and it's been functioning. It's just weird, Adam. It's like the starting group was such a slog for so much of the season, and it was all of these fit and spacing and execution issues, and it just keeps coming up. And if it's coming up often throughout the first 40 minutes of a game, like, it's going to come up in the last 5. It's the biggest thing for me is it's hard to delineate how much of this is on Ant being 23 and not, computing at like a computer, right? And just being able to pick this all apart, which is somewhat understandable at 23, but yet I think where he's at is a little bit underwhelming. And then how much of it is Finch? Like, I don't know. I really don't know. And it's one of those hard things to like, it's easy to be like, oh, Finch, come on. This is your fault. But without being in the huddle and without really understanding what the goals are of what they're getting to in these times, I struggle to know how much of this to put on Ant versus Finch versus the roster construction as a whole.
Well, here's the hard thing, and you kind of alluded to it. You were just mentioning about guys you could put in and guys you could take out. I think that works for one player. Like, okay, we have these guys are our main guys, and we could swap this guy for that guy if we need.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 players, maybe you have a rotation of guys, but when it's we can close with this 5 or a completely different 3 guys over here, and Randall can go to this spot, there's almost too many options. And I honestly think a team needs an identity. And to me, like Naz Reid can close some of these games you mentioned. Randall can play the 5. He can close next to Gobert, although I have no faith in that one. I don't think anybody does anymore. But you can have you have too many options. I just don't know that you can go to it. And that's my concern, is that this team doesn't really have the clarity. And Donte DiVincenzo provided some of that clarity, I think. Like there was some like, okay, Conley went to the bench. Can we roll with this combo? But now that he's out, I feel like that's another wrench in the system where the possibilities almost become more difficult to maintain and manage. So both of those thoughts there, Donte, and just the idea of having, 6 different options is too many. 2 is probably the most.
Yeah, I don't think the plethora of options thing is going to go away. I think that is as baked into their identity 45 games into the season as anything is. Finch has been saying since day one, we have 8 starters. And that sounds like kind of like haha, but like in ways they do. Like Naz, can be a starter. Donte certainly coming off the bench is a starting caliber player, and Nickeil more in the role player type. But if he signs in free agency elsewhere next season, I think he's probably a starter on a different team. So it's kind of like an embarrassment of riches in some ways, but like the riches are like, I don't know, not that value, like quarters, right? Not full dollars. And it's just led to confusion, and it's gotten in the way of having an identity. And I think often about the identity of last season's team and the number 1 defense and how that group played. And it's because Rudy Gobert had a primacy to it in a way that was similar to the Utah years. And I think what we're learning and what Finch is learning is when you even sometimes necessarily take away some of Rudy's primacy, is like, we play this way because we have Rudy Gobert on the team, he just kind of deflates a little bit. And now, and in last night's game, he comes back in with 90 seconds left in the game after they were closing with Randle, and they put him in for defense and to get a rebound, which are obviously 2 things Rudy is great at, or we would have said is great at last season. And on that first possession, Rudy gives up 2 offensive rebounds. And that's been he's having his worst rebounding season. It doesn't feel like one of those teams that's like, damn, like Rudy's in drop, this is going to be tough to score. Like there is just less of that just iron that is a Rudy Gobert team this season. And when you lose some of that primacy, I don't know, and move away from that in your identity, the Rudy Gobert piece of this gets weird. And that's something that I think people are concerned about big picture with him signing a 3-year extension. But on day 1 of the season, and he isn't trade eligible, and he is going to, theoretically be here for, until Ant's in his prime. Right. And the Gobert, I don't know. I'm curious what you thought about the Gobert piece, but that part just stood out to me.
Well, here's what I think with Gobert. Most of the time he's played in this 4-out system, and he's the dive guy. And when you're the dive guy and you're 7'1", the rebounds are there off of length, and somebody has to be boxing you out at all times. They're a little more condensed, or not a little. They're a lot more condensed this year. He's having to battle multiple bodies and different things, and I think that's it. So my hunch is, if the Wolves were able to move on from Randle in some capacity and open up a little more spacing, my hunch is I don't think he's cooked. Players don't usually drop off that much one year to the next. Usually there's a little bit of a decline, and it's a big drop for him. So my hunch is he's not cooked, but this team is just taking away his advantage, so to speak. And now he's just a big lumbering 7-footer.
And you need to find that even if it isn't for this season, if this ends up being like an in-between sort of season, like you need to get that back. And even if Rudy does regress some, like last season, I was looking this up last night, like he made 30% of the salary cap. Right. And he was worth every single penny of that. Number 1 defensive player of the year. They go to the Western Conference Finals. And now next season, when the extension kicks in, he's going to make 21% of the cap. So it's like, can you still get 80% of the Rudy that you got last season? If so, I think he's at a salary cap number that it makes sense that you can build around it. The thing is, and to bring in Donte, is you need to have players who fit with Rudy Gobert and are raised by Rudy's presence, and Rudy's presence raises who they are. And Donte has become that. And Unfortunately, he got hurt a few games after moving into the starting lineup. But I think what we say is like, what players speak French. Like Donte is one of those players that speaks French, much like Kyle Anderson did. When he was on the team last season. Sounds like a joke, but like I think on a Rudy Gobert team, like you got to have a lot of guys that speak French. That's why they traded for Mike Conley, right? That's why they brought in Joe Ingles. That's what
well, this team doesn't speak French, man. Unfortunately, this team doesn't speak French this year. I got to keep it moving because I got another guest, Danny Cunningham, coming up. But Dane, you guys can catch Dane Moore on the Dane Moore pod. One of the truly great local podcasts covering his team. You don't miss anything if you check out that podcast because he's covered on the day-to-day. Dane, thanks so much.
Appreciate it, Adam.
All right, let's take a break. On the other side, I'm going to bring in Danny Cunningham and talk a little bit of Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll get to that on the other side. From big game upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets whether you win or lose. FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. Just visit FanDuel.com/AllNBA to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/AllNBA, ALLNBA. Use our code. Make this playoff seem unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or just text HOPE-NY in New York. Also want to tell you guys about the Game Time app. They got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. So if you're looking to go to do something this weekend, you see that your team is playing in your arena, just open up the Game Time app and see what ticket prices are. You don't like the price you're seeing? Set an alert. You can get an alert message as soon as ticket prices drop, or you can do what I do, which is just go to the arena, park, pay for parking, do everything, and then right when you walk up to the gate, open up the app and see what tickets have dropped right at the last minute. It works almost every single time, and it takes all the guesswork out. And they have that all-in pricing feature right on the front page. So you click on all-in pricing, and you're not surprised with these hidden fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. This is the most important part. Use our code ALLNBA for $20 off your first purchase. You get $20. It helps us out. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code ALLNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, back here on the All-NBA show, make sure you throw a like and a subscribe. Now we're going to bring in my buddy covering the Cavs for Locked On Cavs, Danny Cunningham. Tough one last night, brother. Tough one. What a bizarre game. For a season that has been phenomenal, to have a game come down with mistake after mistake from both ends, culminating in Darius Garland missing 2 free throws. Danny, good to see you, man. But what a weird one. I think you're muted. Your mic is muted. Perhaps see if we get this solved on the fly. The beauty of live podcasting. I just heard something. We'll see if we could figure it out here. There it is.
No?
There you go.
Can you
now
hear
we got
me
you.
now?
I
Okay,
got
we're
you.
not on the good mic, but we're on a mic, so that's better than nothing, I guess. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
You bet.
Last night was bizarre. Like Darius Garland missing, and it's not just the fact that he missed 2 free throws with less than 5 seconds left in that game. It's that he missed 5 in the game. There's not been a game in his career prior to last night where he had missed 5 free throws. He was a guy entering last night that was hovering the 50, 40, 90 mark for the season. He's one of the best free throw shooters in basketball. You see him get fouled, and I know that not everyone loves that rule with the flagrant foul when someone steps under a shooter beyond the 3-point line, but that was correctly called.
Last night's was correct. I don't like it when guys are jumping forward or like where you're like, it's an impossible defense. Last night's one, Tari Eason jumped into his space. That one to me was like, you can't be upset about it.
Right, but he goes to the line, Cavs down 2. You think, oh, the Cavs are going to steal a win in a game
Over.
they really didn't play very well. They did a lot of uncharacteristic things. He's going to make all 3 free throws, and then the Cavs are going to inbound the ball, likely to him again. He's going to make 2 more free throws, and all of a sudden the Cavs are going to turn a 2-point deficit into a 3-point lead with less than 4 seconds left. And he goes to the line and clinks the first 2 free throws. It was really bizarre to see in a night that I think the Cavs did a lot of uncharacteristic things. Like they had several just unforced errors offensively. They allowed 20 offensive rebounds on the same night. They actually had 20 offensive rebounds. Like it was just a bizarre game.
That is a wild one. I didn't notice that. Yeah, they gave up both teams with 20 offensive rebounds. It's kind of the MO, to be honest. Houston's going to get theirs, and obviously the Cavs can do it as well. So maybe that we shouldn't be as surprised. All right, but let's talk big picture stuff with the Cavs, because last night's was bizarre, man. It just was one of those games that was bizarre. They probably should have lost that game until they should have won it.
Yeah.
And then they did lose it. So it kind of worked out in the end. But they've lost 3 of 6 now. And it's the second time this season, I believe 3 of 6. Yeah. And it's the second time this season they've gone through that. Obviously, it's been a great season. You got a nice cushion at the top of the Eastern Conference, but is there any concern about losing these 3 over the last 2 weeks?
I think if you look at the way they've lost games, you can be a little concerned about the way the Cavs play against teams that have length. Like you go back to the first, not the first time they lost back-to-back games were both against the Atlanta Hawks, a team that
Right.
is okay, but they're very long. They're not necessarily great at everything they do, but they have a lot of
Interesting.
length on the perimeter. They're athletic. They do those things really well. And part of it was the Cavs just played bad. I think you can say the same thing about Houston. I think Houston's a better team obviously than Atlanta, but I think they've got some length on the perimeter that might bother the Cavs a little bit. And I do think part of it too, like last night, if Evan Mobley plays in that game, I think it probably looks a little bit different. Maybe the Rockets don't have 20 of those offensive rebounds that turn into so many second chance points. And maybe the Cavs just play better defense on the first shot attempt than they did. And that could be a win. And certainly the Cavs probably play better offensively when he's on the floor too. So I do think that some of it, like if you look at it game by game, I think you can make some, I don't want to say excuses, but you can find reasons as to why they lost that game. But when you add together the teams they've lost to, because it's been Atlanta twice, it's been Boston once, who they've split with so far, last night against Houston, like you can say, okay, well, maybe the length thing, considering they've got 2 smaller guards, is something that can give them issues.
Well, the Knicks have some length on the perimeter. The Celtics have some length on the perimeter. So those are the teams you're up against out, in the East. Even Orlando has some physicality to them. So Garland, Mitchell, smaller guys, maybe that's something to kind of keep an eye on. Although they have passed all of the tests this year, so you don't want to overcorrect too much. It's funny that the Timberwolves struggle, and I had a Timberwolves guy on. They struggle in the clutch, but they got a clutch win last night. And the Cavs are awesome in the clutch, and they get a clutch time loss last night. A little bit of an irony, but that is one of the stories for me. 149.5 offensive rating in the clutch this season. That number is so absurd that there's something to it. I know these numbers can go up or down. A game ball bounces this way or that way, but 149.5 is an insane number. And I've seen it firsthand in the clutch. They have 2 guys that can create, a bunch of guys that can finish, a bunch of shooting. To me, I think it's one of their big strengths is that in the playoffs, when they need a bucket, I actually think they're a team that can get buckets, generate good looks, at least as easy as just about anyone.
Right. And I think this is so ironic coming off of last night because Darius Garland missed those free throws, but he's been one of the best clutch players in the
Yeah.
entire NBA. Like going into last night, he was 9th in clutch points per game of guys that have played in at least 15 clutch situations. And of the 8 guys that are ahead of him, his shooting percentage was 10 points higher than all of them. Like he's been fantastic in the clutch, and he's been a big reason why. And I do think that what is special about this team, because I think it's a fair thing to say Donovan Mitchell is a superstar. Everyone knows what Donovan Mitchell is capable of in regular season games, in postseason games. We've seen him go off for 50 plus points, but he's taken a step. I don't want to say a step back, but a step to the side to allow Darius Garland to flourish, to allow Evan Mobley to flourish. And that is particularly true in clutch time. Like you would think when someone of Donovan Mitchell's stature is on the team, the ball's always going to be in his hands when the game is on the line. And that's not the case with the Cavs. And I think that's a really important part of them being able to generate such good looks is that defenses can't necessarily put so much attention on one guy because there are multiple options that the Cavs have trusted when the game is on the line. I just don't think there's a lot of teams that can say that. You look at You brought up New York. The Cavs played the Knicks earlier this season in Madison Square Garden. It was a game they were trailing by, I believe, 11 or 15 points, something in that neighborhood in the second half. And Darius Garland is the one that carried them in the fourth
That's
quarter
right.
of
That was
that
a
game.
great
And
game.
it was the second week of the season, but I thought that was kind of like, okay, this is probably a good sign for one, that Garland is going to have a bounce back season coming off of everything that he went through last year. And two, that this team's going to operate so much differently in the clutch than just throwing the ball into Donovan Mitchell and say, go get a shot, man. Like, I think that is one of the biggest differences with this team year over year.
So the evolution of the NBA for me is once everybody realized, okay, we could switch everything, that became the status quo. And how you beat that is having big players that, okay, well, we can't switch our guards now on to Jared Allen or Mobley. So now you take away, you negate that. Now you have to fight around screens or what have you, but you have guard to guard actions. Well, how do you mitigate that? By having multiple point of attack scorers. And that's what I think happens for Cleveland is you can run so many actions. That's like, yeah, you can't switch Garland's guy onto Mobley. So we have to fight through that. And all of a sudden we can run this guard to guard action and we have two guys. So we can't put our weakest defender on either of them. And I think that's what they have going for them right now is you really have a hard time switching with them around the entire court, but those are their strengths. I'm curious what you think right now is the biggest weakness that the Cavs have to address or the biggest question that they have to answer in the back half since they have such a cushy lead.
So for me, it's what they do defensively, because this is a team that before Kenny Atkinson got here was great defensively for each of the last 2 years, right? Like I believe they finished first in defense, Donovan Mitchell's first year in Cleveland, and last year, despite Evan Mobley missing a ton of time, they were, I believe, sixth or seventh in defense. So they have been a great defensive team. This year, they're, I believe, just outside the top 10, and they've had stretches where they've been really good. Like in the month of December, they were third in the NBA in defense. And then they've had stretches where they've been really bad. In November, they were 20th in the league in defensive rating. So far in January, they're 24th in defensive rating. And this has been a team that's talked about maybe not valuing regular season wins, which is funny considering they're 36-7, but they've talked about building habits the right way and going about the process and focusing on wanting to have success in the postseason. But building habits to me also means that this is a team that isn't looking to like flip a switch defensively when the postseason arrives, right? Like we've seen teams in the past, particularly I think teams that have already won a title, be able to look themselves in the mirror and say, when April, May, and June roll around, we can just kind of turn on a switch and we'll be really good defensively. We don't need to try super hard at that in January and February. And the Cavs they know they can be really good defensively. I just don't think that we've seen it enough this year yet. And that is something that I do worry about as to whether or not they can just flip a switch on that end of the floor, because not much has changed with how they operate defensively. They play a lot more zone than they did. But other than that, like it's the same personnel. Evan Mobley is obviously great defensively. I actually think the guards are trying really hard. Like no one's ever going to confuse Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland with Gary Payton on that end of the floor, but those guys aren't the turnstiles I think that they may have been earlier in their career. But that's the thing that I look at is like, is this team going to transform into an elite defensive team the way we've seen them be? Because they have transformed from a middle of the pack-ish offensive team to an elite offensive team this year. And if the defense rises up, not even to that level where it's like historically good, but to a level it's like, okay, this is championship caliber, then I think everyone should feel really good about this team.
Well, one way they can improve their defense, and I'm just curious here what you think of this, because I haven't seen much talk about Isaac Okoro, who's playing fewer minutes by a lot, almost 10 fewer minutes than he was last year. Their offense is obviously carrying them through. It's the right move. There's no question about the team is playing exactly the way they're supposed to. But I do wonder if he's a piece. Like if I just look around and say which guys are playing well that are likely to be less valuable in the playoffs, who guys are not playing well or playing a lot who are more valuable, he'd be one guy that I just wonder, is it going to come a point where he's more valuable in the playoffs? What do you make of his season, and what do you make of his importance to the team or non-importance to the team?
Right. I think his season before he hurt his shoulder. So when the Cavs had those 2 games scheduled with Washington and Brooklyn as a result of not advancing to Las Vegas in the NBA Cup, Isaac Okoro hurt his shoulder. I think it was December 13th in Brooklyn. And since then, he's only played in like 3 or 4 games. He missed a couple of weeks, came back, and now he's back on the injury report with it. Before that shoulder injury, he was shooting 48% from three. And the knock on Isaac Okoro has always been, well, he's somebody that teams are not going to defend in the postseason. And that has, for the most part, been true in each of the past 2 playoff years that the Cavs have had. And him shooting that number, even if it's not on a high volume, is something that makes him more valuable when the postseason arrives. I think that what he does defensively is provides another option on really good perimeter players, because sort of the secret to the Cavs defensive sauce isn't Evan Mobley. It's kind of Dean Wade. And that is the guy
Oh, I
that
love this
maybe
take.
doesn't get right, but he
He's
is the
good.
guy that
He's
they will
good.
put on they will put him on the other team's best player. On Monday when Phoenix was in town, he defended Kevin Durant the whole time. And that was a game that they played and they held Phoenix to 92 points, and Evan Mobley didn't play in that. Like, Dean Wade is so valuable to them. Plus, what is interesting about Dean and the way that this team is set up is he's 6'8", 6'9" perimeter player. They don't have another one of him. You can look at Isaac Okoro. He's 6'5", similar size. He's a better defender than these guys, but he's a similar size to Karis LeVert, similar size to Max Strus. You can kind of almost plug and play those guys into Isaac's minutes, and I think that's why his minutes might be down a little bit, but there's not somebody that you can do that with Dean Wade. Like, there's only one of him, and he's super valuable on that end. If Isaac is healthy and shooting the basketball the way that he was prior to an injury to his shooting shoulder, he's incredibly valuable to have in the postseason. But if that shooting doesn't come back, I think that the Cavs will probably play him a little bit less, because they feel like they can get similar defensive efforts elsewhere while having better offensive output.
Is that likely to happen with this injury? I mean, what do you hear? Is that something where it's like, hey, man, he's going to need an off season before he feels like he can shoot again?
Shoulders are really tricky, man. So he came back in 3-ish weeks. The Cavs said it was going to be, reevaluation in 2 weeks. And a lot of NBA teams are very fuzzy with the way they announce injuries to the public. And that's kind of how this one was. He came back, he played in, I think, 4 games. He was like 1 of 16 from 3. And it just never looked comfortable. It didn't look right on the floor. It looked like he was still trying to fight through something. And it's kind of something that you don't, until you start to see the ball go through the rim again from him, you're not going to trust it, considering that's always been the knock on him. Now, if he were somebody that was a high volume 40% 3-point shooter, I think you'd have more trust that he's going to come back and be a really good shooter right away when he's healthy again. But I think until we see it, and we don't know how messed up that shoulder actually is. And the fact that it's his shooting side and not his left side, I think makes this injury much more complicated.
He is Danny Cunningham. You can check him out on Locked On Cavs. I appreciate you taking some time, man, to educate us on the Cavs here. Good luck to you the rest of the way.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All righty. Now, to wrap up the show, we're going to talk about the LA Clippers. And to do that, I brought on one of my favorite beat reporters covering the Clippers for The Athletic. It is La Murray. Well, welcome in, La Murray there. La, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
About to get ready for a 4th game in 5 nights, man. That's how we doing over here.
That's when I DM'd you saying, "Hey, man, you want to hop on the show?" That's exactly what he said. Like, man, we're in the middle of it right now. But I appreciate you taking some time out.
Absolutely.
Especially
I
after
appreciate you having me.
Yeah, last night's late game didn't go. I actually loved the game. It followed a script that you've seen in the NBA a million times. A team is down key players, so some bench guys get an opportunity and they surprise. They play like hell. They play hard, but they can't pull it out because you need your star players to pull it out. And that's how I felt about last night's game with the Clippers, that it was a very well fought game from some, end of bench guys, but at the end of the day, you had to make just one extra shot than they had in them.
It's the NBA. Both teams said that. Even the Celtics, they knew what kind of game that they might get, and the thing that helped was that the Clippers went to Boston at the end of November on the second night of a back-to-back and got absolutely smacked. Those are the kind of things where it's like, you're a pro, you get an opportunity to play. Are you going to play with pride, or are you going to play in a way that makes it very clear that you don't belong on the basketball floor? And I was at the arena and into a dome a week earlier, and I saw a Brooklyn Nets team who have been very capable of competing and giving teams a hard time on most nights. They absolutely did not do that against the Clippers and wind up losing by 59 points. Your name going to be on that roster of who played in the worst losses in franchises forever. You know what I mean? And I had that in mind because when guys get an opportunity to play, it's like, all right, are they going to make shots early, and are they going to continue to play hard and believe that they have a chance to win, or are they just going to be getting cardio on a Wednesday
Right.
night? And I can't even say that these were in the bench guys for the most part. Like Terrence Mann started the year.
Sure.
Derrick, he started the whole year. Kevin, he's been in the second unit. Amir Coffey, they've been in the second unit.
Yep.
But they've also been asked to be the primary playmaker and primary scorers in those second units. And T. Lue ran those minutes hard. But Adam, that's the thing. It's like, I love these games too. I knew what kind of game that we could have gotten. You know what time of the year it is. We're here to evaluate and see who's going to be on these rosters a month from now. I love pros getting a chance to play and seeing what they can do with not just increased minutes, but increased opportunity. And, it was an entertaining game. Sometimes that's all you can ask for.
There's guys like Bones Highland, Jordan Miller, Kobe Brown. Those are more the guys that you're talking about. They get an opportunity to showcase, what do you got in the tank. But the other guys you referenced, Derrick Jones Jr., Amir Coffey, Terrence Mann, this is why last night's game wasn't a total throwaway game in terms of evaluating this team. They have so many defenders on that roster and defenders with length. And to me, that's the story of the Clippers. They just got Kawhi back. This has been a Harden and Powell duo on offense. But you've had this monster defense that's adding Kawhi Leonard to it. And when you can lose, not have your starter players, but still go out against that Boston team and give fits, to me, it's impressive. And that's the story of the Clippers. I every year in January, I buy the Clippers and I feel like a damn fool. But this year, I do feel like there's something a little bit different about them in that their offense is actually not that impressive, but their defense to me just feels like a playoff caliber defense. Is that the story of the season to you so far? And do you agree?
Yeah, it is, and I do agree. They had good name brand defenders for most of the 2-1-3 era, and they never played to that level the way that this defense has. Tyronn Lue is a guy who he understands how to prepare a team and to get a team to play hard. He needed a little extra, and that extra is bringing on Jeff Van Gundy as a defense coordinator. And JVG hadn't been a coach in the NBA since the 2000s. However, he has watched the best of the NBA for 16 years, and then he got to be with the Boston Celtics front office staff while that team won a championship. He knows exactly where the game is. It's not like the game's passing by like he's been at a bed and breakfast like most Raiders do when they hire some of their coordinators. You know what I'm saying? Like Jeff Van Gundy, he knows the game in 2024, 2025, and he's been coaching hard. T. Lue's been coaching hard, and because of the team doesn't have that talent margin for most of the season that they enjoyed for most of the 2-1-3 era, that's a big part of defense too. Are you going to be consistent? Are you going to play with the kind of effort and urgency that's required to win games? Because they're not going to be able to just step on the floor and win off of talent like they did so often, especially last year. You mentioned buying the Clippers last January. T. Lue had 2 Coach of the Year awards or Coach of the Month awards last season in December and in January. That was the middle of a stretch where for 41 games, and 41 games is not a small sample size, right?
Yeah.
41 games, they went 33-8, right? But that team wasn't together. That team didn't defend with urgency. That team kind of turned it on when they felt like they needed to, and that team wasn't they just weren't as together. This team's together. You don't hear a bunch of that, stuff that you heard last year about guys thinking about what's in it for them or what's next. That includes guys who are playing, guys who are stars, as well as guys who aren't playing. You just don't hear it as much. There's a culture that comes with bringing a defensive intensity to every single game, not just the games that you happen to be down by 10 points with 15 minutes left to go. And so, Kawhi coming back enhances the defense, even though Kawhi is not the same defender that he was when he was literally winning trophies for his defense. He's still a guy that teams don't want to go up and be like, yeah, we're going to ISO against Kawhi Leonard. No, you're not. You know what I'm saying? Kawhi's effort and his movements, and we saw this in the Heat game a couple Mondays ago. That dude is still capable, and they've worked so long. Again, he missed months as the team worked to get his body in a place where they felt like he could finish the season. And he is, we saw in the Heat game him denying Tyler Hero, taking him away, getting over screens, harassing him, making it hard, being physical. If you're going to get that dude for the stretch run, then your defense, even if the numbers don't reflect it, your defense is better just because of, like you said, they have the personnel to defend multiple positions and to do so at a higher level for longer stretches of the game.
And I think more than anything, give different looks. A lot of time, if you have a lot of teams have one good defender for a specific matchup, and you got to play 48 minutes. All right, this guy, it's the same look. Maybe we'll change our coverages. The ability to go within the same quarter and throw 3 different bodies at a guy, and it's like you just got to keep adjusting. I got to keep. All right, now I got to go against this guy differently. To me, that's the key. But the real thing about Kawhi, in my opinion, is the defense. I agree with you. It's not getting worse. It's getting better. It's going to get better. The offense is the area that I think is really interesting because statistically they have not been an impressive offense. I think they're 22nd or somewhere there in offensive rating. Kawhi Leonard, though, with them, that obviously represents a whole new look. But the team has found success becoming James Harden style basketball. He has the ball. Norman Powell plays off of him. He gets to kind of orchestrate. What do you think the final form of their offense is? Is this Harden ball, and then he's the safety valve who gets your late shot clock buckets? Is it a whole new process, a whole new identity? How do you think this shakes out?
Well, here's the thing with James. James, I think James has obviously had some pretty low floor games this year. Big part of the offense being bottom 10 is the fact that only the Jazz turn the ball over more often. And James is way up there in the turnovers, right? But when James is on, which again, James is 35, it doesn't happen as often as it did when he was again winning a damn trophy for his absolute, offensive power. But like when James is on, this team is incredible. And you know who makes James' job a lot easier? It's Kawhi Leonard, because Kawhi Leonard is not just a ceiling raiser in the way James is, but he's a floor raiser as well. And what I mean by that is he's a guy that always takes good shots, makes his open shots at a high rate, and he doesn't turn the ball over and make mistakes offensively in a way that those other guys aren't really capable of doing. That is what the Clippers need. I've looked all season. I'm like, do they need a better backup point guard? Do they need extra ball handlers? I mean, they were starting Chris Dunn for a while just so James wouldn't wear down as much, because the simplest way to disrupt the Clippers, it was to pressure James and lean on him. Literally, I've seen multiple defenders this season wear James Harden like a mink coat. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just
taking his legs out
and it's
over
effective
time
because James will turn the ball over in the fourth quarter, and it'll be the most elementary thing. Just like you didn't see that guy with his hands out, and you tried that pass anyway. Those kind of turnovers. But Kawhi being on the floor, I know you mentioned Norm and James. It's really been Norm, James, and the Vince Zubats. You've seen the Denver games. You've seen what Zoo's
He's
been
great.
doing. Yeah, like it's complementary offense. So you have James who can orchestrate your pick and rolls and obviously run a lot of ISOs, and every Toronto offense is about mismatch basketball. Where's the mismatch? Do you have, players who can take advantage of those mismatches in ISO, and playing off of that, making the right play consistently, which is what the Clippers did last night. The bugaboo was what? Giving the ball away too often. But, you have James who does what he does. Norm is valuable because he's in the Paul George role in terms of, we're going to give you a lot of touches, but you're valuable off the ball. We're going to run the handoffs for you. We're going to bring you off screens. We're going to find you with that little curl along the baseline and see how teams play off of that. Like, Norm's valuable whether he has the ball in his hands or not. Zoo's been great in the post. He's running that pick and roll with James. They've been putting that work in for more than a calendar year now. And with Kawhi, you got a guy who can isolate, take shots in the mid range, which that's the team doesn't do as much of. Mid post options, and when teams double Kawhi as if he's been playing all year, the ball moves. You get your spacing right. So that's why this works. None of those guys are in each other's way offensively, and that's how you need to play in the NBA, especially when you're not necessarily a ball movement team.
How active do you think this team is going to look to be at the deadline? Because they got a lot of guys, but and obviously you got the PJ Tucker thing. Like, is this a team that you think is going to be pretty aggressive, or is it just maybe a small move here or there to complete things?
All of the above, man. First of all, it's the LA Clippers. They never go a season without a trade.
Yeah,
Never. Not under it. It just doesn't happen. That'll be my headline if it happens this year. And as you mentioned, there are just too many guys on this roster who need to have certain things addressed. Guys who are not with the team, not playing. There are too many of one position, not enough of another position. Like, do I think they swing for the fences and get a star? I don't really think that's necessary or necessarily prudent, because this team is not playing for just this year. This team understands that they're just coming out of an era. This is a transitional team.
Is
and
this
so
true?
You need to
I find this surprising, Law, real quick. I got to interrupt you because I find this surprising.
Yeah.
Like, Kawhi Leonard, to your point, is 35 years old. The health for the Clippers to
James
be
is 35.
James Harden. Sorry. James Harden.
Yeah.
35.
Kawhi's not that old yet.
Yeah. James is 35. And this team, the health is like, if you get a healthy playoff run, that might be the only one. So I don't know if I agree with this. Like, it's not about this year. I feel like it's about every year they're in until the wheels are off.
Oh, I agree. I mean, to that point, this isn't a team that's going to start over. You see who owns their drafts for the next few years still. Like, they can't do that. They just opened a new arena. They can't, they want playoff games. James wants a championship. He wants to make the playoffs because he's made the playoffs every single year of his career. Kawhi is not out here playing just to participate. Those guys talk about what they don't have and what they want at this stage of their careers. And so if there's a deal out there to get that kind of guy, it has to make sense, but the Clippers will obviously look at it. I think what's more likely is that they look to optimize their roster, because here's the thing: trading for a contract that cripples their long term and locks them in and kills their flexibility, that's not what the Clippers are interested in. They just let Paul George walk, and they took a lot of crap for it in July.
Right move.
You don't hear that same thing now, do you? So that's where we're at. It's like Norman Powell is giving you great production. What do you do with that? Do you ride that out? Do you extend him? Do you trade him for a player who might be, 25% better, but also, again, just locks you in? And it's like that 25% is not significant. It's like, what? You're going to get a guy who's slightly better offensively, maybe a little younger, but also is paid 3 more years at a rate where you can't get out of it if something goes sideways. I'm not sure the Clippers are trying to do that. So I am very interested to see what could happen, because every single position could be affected. And we're talking, this deadline is popping up soon, 2 weeks. And just because it's a deadline, Adam, doesn't mean you wait until the deadline to make your moves. So that's another thing that I'm paying attention to as well.
This is my last one for you. I recall Ty Lue at the start of the year. I probably read it from an article from you saying like some quote about, I really love this team. Like, people are acting like we had a bad offseason. I really believe in this one. And I just did a tiers thing the other day on Twitter where I just put out the teams I believe in and teams I don't. And I had the Clippers and the teams I don't. And right after I hit publish, I don't know if you ever do this. You hit publish on a take and then you sit there and you go, well, hold on a second. I don't know if I almost immediately changed my mind. The Clippers are the team that I immediately changed my mind on because I actually do buy it. Are they going to be healthy? Who knows? That's a huge question. But do you think people are sleeping on this Clippers team that has had performances that look like a top 4 team in the West this year? Do you think people are sleeping on their chances to be that?
I mean, shoot, the Clippers were picked by a lot of people to not even make the play-in tournament. to be in the bottom 5 in the West. It's the Clippers. Like, sleep is just something that comes with the Clippers. They thrive off of that. They play their best ball in the seasons where they're expected to do less. And the Clippers need to just help themselves. You know what I mean? They will have opportunities to play better teams. Not necessarily in the West. They're running out of games in that department. They don't play the Nuggets again. They are down 0-3 to the Thunder, 0-3 to the Rockets. They have 2 games left against the Grizzlies, but they don't visit Memphis again. They did a great job winning in Memphis. That was probably one of their best wins. The West is incredibly volatile, and outside the Thunder, it's like, how good are you? You know what I mean? It's about to be crazy in the Western Conference playoffs, because even with the Thunder, it's like, it'll be interesting to see who their first round matchup is, because of how that team is built physically. So, the Clippers give themselves a chance because outside of the Thunder, they have the best defense in the NBA. That's just an objective thing right now. That defense is trending up. I love how a team comes out in the first quarter of the season, but now we're in midseason. Did that hold up? And for the Clippers, the answer is yes, because last year they wanted to defend at a top 5 level, and they defended pretty well, even though they started poorly, had the James Harden trade, had to readjust their starting lineup and everything. But they did. Even when they were ascending as a team, the defense was not the reason why, and that was a concern all year by the front office, the coaching staff. So the Clippers need to look at these, not the Clippers, I guess people who are, trying to decide what kind of team the Clippers are. It's going to be those big games. Like, can you beat the teams? Like, they won it last night against the Celtics. They knew that would have been loud. Hey, they get 2 games against the Knicks. They get 2 games against the Cavaliers. You got a bunch of road games after the All-Star break, like immediately. The Bucks are coming in here Saturday. They're playing a lot better. Exactly. Like, you want to play against these teams and see where you're at. No moral victories. You got to win some of these games. And if they don't win those games, they're going to continue to get slept on. It's as simple as that.
Well, they got one of the best defenses in the NBA. They have one of the best coaches in the NBA. They got one of the best beat reporters in the NBA. I mean that sincerely. I always enjoy reading their stuff. And in 2025, beat reporting is a bunch of things. It's social media, it's Twitter, it's written stuff, all this stuff. You do a fantastic job, and I always appreciate it, brother.
Hey, thank you so much, Adam. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. All righty. Thanks to Law Murray, Danny Cunningham, Dane Moore, 3 great guests. Hopefully you enjoyed the deep dive, talking to some people on the ground covering those teams their legs off again tomorrow. But I'm going to have Kevin O'Connor on. We're going to be talking Nuggets, and we're going to be doing a future NBA draft of future MVPs. So we're going to draft players that we think will win MVPs in the future, and I'm excited to do that. It'll make a good conversation around the MVP. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button, and join us tomorrow as we wrap up the show. We'll see you guys.
Silly like the mayor.